Hey everyone, welcome to our October briefing. We're so glad that you could be here, especially during busy, crazy election season. I'm Eric Edelson. I'm the communications director here at Ruby, and we are so excited to have with us today John Russell. John is from the Ohio Valley. And he is a journalist with More Perfect Union, which creates these really cool little kind of mini documentaries on bread and butter topics that most of the media entirely ignores. I became acquainted with John, I guess about a year ago, when I saw a video that he had created for More Perfect Union, where he went to a Trump rally in Erie, Pennsylvania, and started talking to the folks there and wound up having some really meaningful conversations where he was able to make common cause with people wearing MAGA hats. And then the next thing I knew, just a month ago, there was John up on the main stage at the Democratic National Convention giving a short speech that was easily my favorite 2 minutes of the convention. So we're going to play that speech for you now, and then we will hear from John. So John and everyone, welcome. And Jackie, you can go ahead and play that now.
Hello, America. Thank you to the workers that make this convention happen. Let's never forget how essential all of our labor is. I come from Appalachia. We kept the lights on in this country for generations. But the wealth made by our broken backs and our black lungs never did trickle down. And Washington listened to rich men demanding that we stick with dirty energy at any cost. Across the country, working class people are looking for a political home after years of both parties putting profit above people. Now, Trump, a billionaire, says that he'll take on the elites, but then he promises handouts to big oil, and he punches down at anyone with the guts to be different. But populism that insists we are too different to get along, is just divide and conquer by a different name. There's another sort of populism with roots in this party that we in West Virginia know well. They called us rednecks back in the 1920s because striking workers from all different races wore red bandanas around their necks as they fought and died for respect and a living wage. Their fight yesterday is our fight right now, right now. It is our choice to build on this progress and to create a political home for the mass of working Americans fighting for control over their government, their workplaces, and their planet. And it is our moment to live up to. Let's get after it. Thank you very much.
So John Russell, tell us your story. Tell us what you hope to accomplish with More Perfect Union, and tell us how we can help.
Yeah, well, thank you, Erica, and hi to everybody out there. Watching that back really made me realize the effect of the hair and makeup teams in the DNC production. I don't come across, as you can see, as that tan there, so they really do wonders before they put you on the big screen. But yeah, it is really good to be here. I like so many of the groups, all of you out there who are really doing the work in communities to try and bridge this massive divide that we have. That's some of the best work, in my opinion, that could be done right now. And it's a lot of what I tried to do at More Perfect Union. If you haven't heard of that outlet, that's the one that I work for. I'd encourage you to check it out. Like Erica was mentioning, a lot of different people work for it. Its mission is about building power for working class people wherever they are, which is a really broad umbrella that, allows you to do a lot of different stories. We have stories about how the Koch brothers are monopolizing fertilizer inputs. We have right to repair stories out there. One of the top stories on the outlet is about Dollar General, and how I'm sure all of you in every corner of the country have seen, Dollar Generals cropping up kind of where main streets are either on the way out or have been long gone. These are the kind of things that we're able to do there. And just like ending up on the DNC stage, it was wildly improbable that I ended up at More Perfect Union. So you asked about the story, how I got there. And that started in a bar in the Ohio Valley, really. Just before COVID hit, I had been working as the rural outreach director for the Elizabeth Warren campaign, stationed mainly in Iowa. Shout out, to any Iowans that we have on the call here. And while we're thinking about places where folks are, if we have, just to digress a little bit, if we have anybody on from Asheville or the hurricane impacted areas, I hope you and the people that you might know there are doing well. And, especially if you have anything to share, to elevate for that, I would encourage people to put that in the chat. Anyway, I was working on Democratic political campaigns for a good long stretch there, about 10 years, ended up on the Warren campaign. But after that, if we didn't go all the way, I had grand plans to take a road trip out west and kind of think about stuff. And Elizabeth Warren unfortunately dropped out on March 6th. And I said, great, I'll go on a big old road trip to deal with this, maybe around March 13th or something of 2020. And that did not happen. COVID happened, of course. So we all did what we did, and I decided to move back to the Ohio Valley. If you're unfamiliar with that, it is kind of where the Rust Belt meets Appalachia. And I got a job bartending there, and got it in my head after having been involved with political campaigns that one of the things we're really missing, especially when you are up against the likes of Donald Trump, is popular political education and media that, puts a different frame on things, that tries to bring people together on class lines, that tries to actively fight against racial division. And I figured I would go on to the brand new platform of TikTok and start covering, labor disputes, new organizing where people were trying to reach out and start unions, and work in the bar, make short videos, put out a newsletter about the things that I found covering that beat. So I started doing that, and that was going pretty well. And then some of you might remember the East Palestine train derailment. That happened in the county where I grew up, and I was making media at the time, focused on working class issues, and decided to go up there and cover it as best as I could. A lot of the people affected there were folks that I went to high school with. I had gone to their, homecoming as a kid. And that is where More Perfect Union first noticed the work that we were putting out there. It was then when I got paired with a team that is still the one that I work with today. And we, try to do our best to represent what is and still is, a real tragedy up in East Palestine. That was one of the first videos that we made with More Perfect Union. It started the relationship there. But then, there were other videos that I worked on that ended up being noticed by people at the DNC. So it was kind of all of this planet aligning happening. But one of the beats that More Perfect Union tries to do is to communicate. I think if we have a lot of Democrats on the line, it's oftentimes you feel like, hey, we're doing good stuff here, but are we really communicating it in a way that reaches the ears and the eyes that it needs to? So the Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act. That was one of the biggest investments in clean energy that is now responsible for so many projects everywhere, but also in rural areas. And I went to cover one of those. This was the Blue Oval City project in Western Tennessee. If you don't know about that, it's one of the largest battery plants being built on Earth. It's under Ford. And we went down because it's located in the second poorest county in Tennessee. And a lot of workers there, there's nearly no union history. There's no union density in that part of the country. But because of this investment made possible by political wins, for the first time, a lot of workers in an 80% African-American county were joining unions for the first time. So we went down to ask them what kind of effect that had on their life. Having not a lot of labor history there, having a lot of propaganda from the right wing about unions being the first thing that people think of. We went down to find out what real effect that had, and it was life-changing. And a good thing about doing the work at More Perfect Union is I get to go around to every pocket of the country, and that is the kind of story overwhelmingly that I hear when people are coming into the labor movement, however that is, whether they're starting an independent union at Amazon. I went up to cover that, or starting an independent union at Starbucks, or joining an established union because of federal investment, like the administration made possible. The common thread through all of that, and what I think we're really at the beginning of right now, is how life-changing it is, not only to directly advocate for yourself to improve your pay and benefits, but the community and the power that people feel when they take that first step into the labor movement, especially at a time right now when, after a long, long slump, after union density has dropped off, after a couple scandals and approval ratings of unions going down, people are joining at a time now when more folks than ever are approving of unions. There's new leadership that's really exciting. There, at least for the years of the Biden administration, they have been working under an administration that's not totally hostile. And what I find traveling around and covering that is, a genie being let out of the bottle and people discovering their power. And I tried to, this is a really long-winded way of saying, that's the video that got noticed by the DNC and allow me to be invited there and give that speech. And in that spirit, I really wanted to characterize that movement from the stage and challenge the Democratic Party to recognize that as the base that they had a long time ago, that has come back around again, especially now when it is needed so much. The inequality is off the charts. Worker power is, through the floor. The richest people and the corporations that they run, have near total power. But for the first time in this job, I'm really starting to see people view a direct way to fight back against that. So I tried to go up on the stage there and represent that well, because I think that's as we're looking for solutions to kind of counter the Trump movement that we see everywhere, and it is a movement. We need a movement to counter that. And I think you can start to see that coming together, especially through the labor movement. It'll happen a lot of different ways, but that's one of the big ones. So that is how I got to the stage. Sorry for the long ramble there. But it was a lot of planets that aligned.
Great. So are you ready to open it up, or was there more you wanted to say about like what's up next for you in More Perfect Union? And are there ways in which I'm thinking about, whether like labor union can make use of some of that footage, or other groups that are doing organizing? Are there ways that they can be, making use of all this great material that you're creating?
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'll say a couple more things just about the nature of the work. When we were talking about that, I haven't something I think about from my personal experience all the time is that, for about 10 years, I was working on Democratic campaigns. Then I switched over to doing media, and a lot of that was based around the labor movement. But what I think might be interesting to people on the call is just how I was interacting in both of those jobs, in media and Democratic campaigns. I've always been, there's this a feeling I'm sure is familiar to many of you. Rural Democrats, the world gets really small really quick. You start to know a lot of people, you start to see a lot of the same people around. And I would work in rural communities, both as a political organizer and now doing media. But when my job changed to, rather than trying to organize people to support a political party, when it changed from that to working in the same communities, but genuinely trying to understand people in the communities, what they want, what they hope for, what they fear, what is affecting their everyday lives, trying to understand them first as part of a story that we're going to be telling. It immediately became easier, when your job was not to defend a political party, it became a lot easier to relate to folks, to have a good faith conversation, to let some of the guards down that people put up when you're talking about, a voting choice between two parties. A lot of that falls apart when you're able to, not go there with the express goal of trying to get somebody to vote some way, but trying to find the common ground with people and then start talking about, well, it looks like we're sharing a lot in common. What do you think we should do about this? How do we organize the power to change the things that we both want to change? That became a lot easier when I was, doing media work. And I think somewhere in there is kind of a lesson for rural organizing, although I'm sure nobody here needs lessons because you all do it every day and live in these communities just like I do.
Well, yeah, we're definitely all learning as we go. What you just talked about in terms of, talking to people in a way that where they can let their guard down and really have a more meaningful, like depolarized conversation does seem like a good segue to the video of you at John's gone to a few Trump rallies, but the one that really caught my eye was from a year ago in Erie. And so why don't we watch just the first 5 minutes of it, and people get a feel for what I'm talking about.
Socialism, obviously, we all agree, communism doesn't work. Yeah. But extreme capitalism, as we're seeing right now, does not. With this corporate capitalism, also has its problems.
How much money is too much money for one person?
It's a tough call. I know when they have these billions, you're like, well, they really don't need it. Yeah, we agree with that.
Why Trump instead of Bernie Sanders?
What I look at is more progressives like the Bernie Sanders faction, stuff like that. We actually see a lot of the same problems.
I would vote for a Bernie Sanders before I'd vote for like a Ted Cruz or a Marco Rubio.
What would it have taken for you guys to not go into the rally and to instead get ice cream with me, a flaming leftist?
Well, first of all, you
I'd
have
be
to
happy.
buy.
All right, I'm buying. We are polarized. There is no doubt about it. But I came to this Trump rally on a hunch. I've poured drinks at a Rust Belt dive bar for the last year. And when your county votes for Trump and the bartender looks like I do, people kind of assume that you're on the same page. But sometimes you actually are. So here's my hunch. For all the focus on culture war issues, the working class on the left and the right have a lot more in common than we're led to believe. And if that's true, it could and should have huge implications for the upcoming presidential election. So I went to Erie, Pennsylvania to find out. Are we rolling? Okay. We're here at the Trump rally today. Why did you come out today?
To support my 45th president. He didn't
Okay.
lose. He called out the Washington establishment, and I absolutely loved it. You know, he's definitely not a Republican because Mitch McConnell and them would be backing him, and DeSantis would be running against him. You're obviously not a Democrat no more, so we're more of a politically homeless faction that loves America and will make all the changes that we can to make it great. Prices are just higher. Like you go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
I buy the same thing every time I go to the grocery store. I spend $102 at Aldi's. I was just telling my uncle this.
Yeah.
I'm spending over $200 now.
Yeah.
So things are more expensive. I think people are more scared.
Our money doesn't have no value. And that's why we're having problems. This whole inflation thing, it's been building and building for multi-decades and it's getting close now. You work at McDonald's, right?
I do.
Do you feel like you're getting everything out of work that you're putting into it?
I believe I should get paid more. All I am doing is I'm working my ass off to get my money. I'm a hard worker and I feel like I deserve more.
I work down in West Virginia
Yeah.
on the rigs for Evil Big Red. Halliburton.
Oh my God.
Halliburton, we were 2 weeks on, 1 week off, so you never got to go home. We were the lowest paid of all the workers out there. I only made $13.50 when I got hired on.
For Halliburton.
For Halliburton, yep. Probably wouldn't have an Iraq war if it wouldn't have been for the Halliburton
There's
and
a
Cheney and stuff. We were expendable. That's all it was. Halliburton, Big Red, they called it. You're just part of the machine, and the machine can be replaced.
as expendable as, people who went over to fight a rich person's war in Iraq.
Yep, pretty
Yeah.
much.
5 years ago, I came to the realization that I've been hoodwinked. I have zero respect for Dick Cheney. I have zero respect for George Bush.
What did it for you there, and why did you end up saying George Trump?
It was a lie.
And this
They
might not-
lied about the Iraq war. There were, there was no reason for
To get in
us
that
to
war.
go into war in Iraq other than the military-industrial complex
It's just conspiracy
wanting
theory,
the
too,
war.
The global corporations, do they have, the Goldilocks question: too much, just enough, or too little power? Where would
I
you
feel like
play?
their only thought is more money,
Right.
more power. That's all you care. Whoever has the most
So
money.
obviously, it's too much.
Yep.
When you have a company like BlackRock that's worth $9 trillion,
And Vanguard's what?
Vanguard's $8
Yep.
trillion. Obviously, I'm not going to argue. There's a problem with that.
So you think the finance sector,
Yeah.
does it have too much power, just the right amount of power, not enough power?
Way too much power.
The financial sector.
100%. Yes. These people really, a lot of these people they don't realize are unelected officials. So all these politicians have this plan for how they're going to fix the economy, but then they just get in there, they don't do anything, and they're funded by the people, and those people are not elected, and they control the people that are elected.
What role do you think, the consolidation of these large corporations? I came from. It'll be three or four companies that control the entire market.
Yeah.
Chicken,
Yep.
eggs,
Yep.
beef.
It shouldn't happen.
Yeah, the working class has gotten beaten up because of the loss of small businesses. And my question would be, I would say, why aren't they here anymore?
As a small business owner, I feel like we aren't represented that much in America.
That's great. Hey, Erica, can I
Yeah,
jump
great.
in?
Yeah, go right ahead.
John, one of the things that you do besides all the work specifically for organized labor and for unions, it seems to me you're like the opposite of the old Stephen Colbert shtick of going out to the everyday man and woman and making them look like idiots and dopes and capturing, who knows how much editing, capturing the sort of the most foolish thing that you could imagine they would say. And you're out there turning on your camera and mic, and what you're getting is a whole lot of insightful, thoughtful, often kind of left-leaning comments from a lot of country folks, a lot of people at Trump rallies. And I wondered if you'd expand on that a little more. Like, are you sort of selectively editing it down, or is that a pretty good representation of the kinds of things you hear when you're out and about? Same with your Estill County video.
Yeah, thanks for the question. But in any video we shoot 10 hours of footage that gets taken down to 10 minutes. So there are definitely selective choices there. And some of the people that you just saw in the video will come out and say some of the worst stuff that you've heard. But really, I think that is just a reflection that people are really complex, and we don't have represented in political media the fact that whatever you believe, you have a good reason to believe. Just like anybody on this call, everybody has a personal reason that is good to them to believe what they believe. And I always try to, in pieces of media, make folks remember that, like, especially with this group of people, if you're going to a Trump rally, we all have to remember that Republicans know how to do politics, and they, decades ago, and to this day, they hold regular meetings, they cook up media networks, they dispatch people from Charlie Kirk on college campuses to whoever's in charge of rolling up local news stations and making their content more political. They have a strategy that's been operating for 50 years, that's been funded by billionaires, that's been trained like a laser beam on a group of people to sell this false version of populism that's now become so powerful. Entire media networks were invented to get people to point the finger across the table at each other instead of up, which a lot of these folks, like you just saw, naturally want to do. I mean, one of the guys brought up BlackRock, and with More Perfect Union covered BlackRock in a video, but there you have these asset managers taking all of our money and voting how to control it. And the three largest asset managers are pushing around trillions, tens of trillions of dollars. They're all equally invested in each other. They have commanding shares of every one of the Fortune 500 companies, and they all work together. And that information isn't lost on people at a Trump rally. And, I don't know if Donald Trump does anything intentionally, or maybe he's just really lucky, a broken clock is right twice a day. But for whatever reason, I think when you have even folks like that who show up to a Trump rally, realizing the power of, the financial sector and the biggest businesses, it's kind of a powder keg. People can start, it's situations like that where people can really get together and talk about changing the economy. And I think Donald Trump stepped in right at that moment when it could have happened, after we've been through, decades of war and financial crises. He stepped in and he captured a lot of the energy that could have gone to reforming, the economy that we all live with. And instead of those people going down the road of race and class solidarity through something like the labor movement, he's managed to siphon off a lot of them and sell them this fake version of populism that gets them to hate their neighbor or point out differences and get their own self-worth from knowing that somebody's lower than them. That is the kind of movement that he built, that I don't fault anybody at a Trump rally for, because I think the only reason why somebody like Donald Trump works or has any power is in the absence of the real thing that people are wanting to do, to really reform a lot of the power in our economy and the powerlessness that they feel. So, along those same lines, that's why I think it's so important. By no means is the labor movement the only answer to things, but I have a hard time thinking of something that's more direct at improving people's pay and benefits, at getting people who are all in one workplace, who might be of all different races and religions, but who need each other to stick together if they're going to get anything done. I think the labor movement is the home to combat a lot of the racism that is brought up by people like J.D. Vance suggesting from the debate stage that housing prices are so high because of immigrants. Well, if you're in a workplace with an immigrant, you know them, and if you're trying to unionize, you need them for you to win. So I look at that and see the answer to a lot of our problems, although it's by no means the only one. But it is my experience going out and doing these stories that, I think a lot of the times you brought up the Daily Show or a lot of these other channels that'll go out and make people look the worst or the least articulate. There's another side to that, and there are the ingredients to bring people together who share what we all share of having to go to work. There are the ingredients to bring people who share that common problem together and make good on a lot of what you just heard. A guy in Halliburton making $13 an hour probably has a question of, I'm bringing the gas out of the ground. It's millions of dollars a day in Appalachia here. Why doesn't that come down to me? We should have an answer for that. And you can definitely strike up a conversation with somebody like that. And, I hope that's the work that we all continue to do.
Let's others feel free to jump in. This can really just be kind of a conversation with questions and comments. I'll lead us off with another one, which is when I was watching your interviews, and then you said later, yeah, sure, sometimes they do say some things that are jarring in a bad way. I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, is in those conversations when we hear something we don't like or that's really offensive. It's just like, oh my God, deer in the headlights, what do I do? So I'd love to hear what your strategy is for handling that. Do you share your views on that issue? Do you explore their views on those issues? Or do you just head for the hills and try and steer things back toward where you want it to be?
Yeah, I know how that feels too. And I think one of the things that I have going for, in my toolbox to do this work was I openly identified as, one of the things I like to do is, just admit I'm an open socialist to people. And I did this at a bar, a dive bar that had poker machines in it in a rural county that voted for Donald Trump by 70%. A lot of people, that's a loaded word, and it's kind of a conversation starter. And, if you're going out and saying that, you discover how to get past a lot of the things that you hear pretty quick. But for me, it's always naming, anything you're hearing of that nature is usually just division that has been engineered. And I usually try to steer people into a conversation of, well, where did that come from for you, and who might be benefiting, if we're constantly divided along racial lines like that, and try to talk about just the simple, it's familiar to people, divide and conquer as a concept. I mean, people at a Trump rally are going to know that. And I think when they, again, back to the media network that's been trained on them for so long to load them up with a lot of divisive ideas, I think it really helps to point out who wins when you yourself give into that kind of division. You have people out here at a Trump rally saying the richest people in their companies are controlling our lives. Well, how do they do that? It's like 2,000 people, right? We outnumber them way more than the other way around. We live in a democracy. How is it that 1,000 people are just kind of controlling all of us? It's divide and conquer. And what does that look like? It looks like this conversation we're having right here. So let's keep our eye on the ball and the fact that you're working for Halliburton making $13 an hour. How is that possible when your job is bringing millions of dollars out of the ground? You know, and who is really to blame for you making $13 an hour? You know, is it Halliburton or is it the guy who's a different color working next to you? I usually try to name that game in a good faith way and walk through that and try, you know, to keep everybody on the same page, but, you know, not by sweeping it under the rug, but by going through it. That's another feature of the labor movement that I like so much, because that has to happen if you're going to win a contract. There's just no way around it.
Yep. Other folks. Anthony, anything in the chat you want to bring up?
Yeah, I see a question from Jim in the chat. He says, John, why do they, presumably the folks at the Trump rallies or others you've talked to, not realize Trump is just a Trojan horse for those same elites that they despise?
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting one, right? And again, I would chalk that up to we're just really awash in media that suggests he isn't those things. You know, if I go out into rural Kentucky and I ask people, what is it about a billionaire? You know, I was talking to a person in Eastern Kentucky in one of the poorest counties of the state, and she was cutting hay on a 90-degree day to feed beef cattle. She had maybe 10 of them to feed 5 kids. And I said, what is it about a billionaire in this part of the country that resonates with you? And I posed the same question to a guy, you know, up in Michigan. And really, this is something that comes up all around the country. And what was the guy in Michigan saying? He was the conversation ended with this person up in Michigan thinking that the system has been so captured by elite interests that they need a con man to get out of the capture. The answer I get back from people when I ask that is usually he has so much money that he can't be bought by this system. And there's a lot of respect for business too. I think that's one of the, you know, hurdles that you have to get over. There's this kind of constant trust in people that do business. But, you know, one of the things that we try to do at More Perfect Union is show, you know, there's a big difference between the small business owner that you see around in your community and the companies in every sector, the 3 or 4 companies that control and work everything together. But all it takes, you know, we talk about meeting people where they are. They're there right now, but it doesn't take a lot to get them to a place where they see that, you know, billionaires have class solidarity. They work together. They protect their own. And I think, you know, the job is having a lot of conversations in our community to walk people through that and to bring up those contradictions. And we need that represented more in media, which is what we try to do at More Perfect Union. And what I would say is one of the things, you know, in my own mind that can get us to a place where we really change our politics is to go at those 2 things, to show that billionaires have class solidarity, they work together, and the businesses that you think of are much different than the Main Street. You know, we're talking about finance, insurance, healthcare, everything. It's all a handful of these companies that are kind of plotting against you. They're right there, but they need a little bit more media.
Yeah, and it seemed from the interviews like people were really ready, like they already halfway or 90% of the way knew what you were saying. So it didn't like require a huge explanation. They were just like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we got a bunch of hands up now. Let's start with you, Reba.
Hey guys, really grateful for this conversation. It's I work with grassroots organizing in Western Wisconsin, and what you show in your videos, John, is what we see all the time at doors. It's what people in rural communities know, just sort of intrinsically. We have relationships with people across the political divide. We agree on a lot of the same things. I am really interested in this specific context on the step. I mean, like, you kicked off your speech at the DNC by acknowledging that both parties have been used as a vehicle for the interests of corporations and the 1%, the super wealthy. I have found that acknowledgement is really key to building trust and bridging sort of like the gap when we're beginning to step into more like electoral focused work with our base of people as we build power. You know, like with folks who show up to our meetings in Trump hats or in Second Amendment shirts, as well as like self-identified socialists in the same space. And I'm curious, as we do like the deep work of breaking down that like bucket of cultural divide that people have been put into by years and decades of work in media and by conservatives and the Republicans associated with the Republican Party. I'm curious, like, what other tools or guidance you found to be really useful to begin to broach that discussion of like, not just like creating class racial consciousness, solidarity, but also like talking about how like broaching, supporting a political party that folks may not identify with in sort of their bones. Just curious what you'd say on that.
Thanks for that. It's a great question. I'll try to keep it short here. A couple things I would say, and this is all just speaking from my own experience, but I always try to root whatever conversation I'm having with folks, and I'm sure everybody out here knows this because you've all done this work, but I find it always more helpful to ground everything that I'm saying and everything in how I'm listening to people in my own experience, and just keeping it real about how political parties have interacted in your community. I'll say this, big grain of salt. Donald Trump must lose, right? Donald Trump has to lose. But then I usually follow up with people that doesn't, the fact that I think that does not mean that I, wholesale love everything the Democratic Party does. In my own hometown, this is where the Rust Belt meets Appalachia, and it is very true that both political parties have horribly failed us here. We have economic terrorism happening in the Ohio Valley. Our entire industrial base went away, and it was NAFTA and both parties, and that's different in rural states, because industrial bases are going to have a different opinion than the farm states, which is something I run into all the time. But when I'm trying to talk to people, in the place where I am, it is true to acknowledge that both parties have really sold you down the river. That doesn't mean that we can't be real about how the Republican Party is rooted in the defense of property, and the people who control the most property now, it's not over more than 10,000 people who really have the true power. That's who they're working for. You'll never catch me voting for them, and I tell anybody this. But also that makes me view the Democratic Party not as something that has to win every time, even though that's usually what I want. I think when I try to identify with somebody that might be open to persuasion, I say, we'll stand with anybody that stands with us. We'll stand with anybody who stands with working people. And the Republicans are pretty clear about where they stand. It's not with working people. And the Democrats can be a vehicle if all of us get together and organize and put that energy into it to take it in a direction. And it's usually sharing that kind of experience, you know, in my experience, that helps. You know, if you're a socialist talking to a Republican, it helps people see that you're not just out here trying to pave the way, no matter where the Democratic Party stands. You are speaking to them as a person, that you want to come over to your side, and then you're going to take that into a political vehicle to do the things that you both share in common. And I've found that those are pretty possible with the kind of conversations that start that way.
Erica, I'm going to add one thing to what John said. This is Anthony, before we go to Musa, which is that what Reba brought up about owning up to the fact that both parties have betrayed. John obviously feels that way very strongly. I've found that two things. One is that Democrats in general are really reluctant to do that, because there's a little bit of this, well, yeah, we're not perfect, but look at them, you know, and it's true. They are so much worse. Okay, we get that. But what I've also found when I ran for Congress both times is that admitting that the Democrats specifically have sometimes screwed up, rather than some bland statement, actually opens doors to conversations with people who otherwise would just assume that I'm just a rah-rah party guy. And so I think strategically, we have to be willing to own up to our mistakes to open those conversations.
I'd agree.
Yep, thanks for that, Anthony. Okay, Musa and everyone else, thanks for waiting, and go ahead, Musa.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you so much, John and Ruby, for hosting this conversation. I think it's super important. So I live in Brooklyn. I'm from Connecticut, you know, not the rural US, a small city in Connecticut. And living in Brooklyn now, you know, a lot of my friends are left-wing organizers. They come from Ivy League schools, from liberal arts schools, from left-leaning families, and they live in Brooklyn. I've got friends in LA, Seattle, you know, Boston, Northeast, or, you know, LA, affluent coastal cities, very cosmopolitan. And, you know, a lot of them are organized and politically active, and they're very well-intentioned. They care a lot about the issues. But they're not friends with conservatives. They don't know any conservatives. They talk in a certain way and dress in a certain way and act in a certain way that working class people I know are not familiar with, and sort of is alienating to them. You know, they talk about, I always bring it up, like climate change. They talk about climate change and sort of it's an existential crisis, and it's an issue of justice, and Mother Earth needs to be protected, rather than like clean air and clean water and protecting the American landscape. But you know, they're very well intentioned, and they do a lot of great work. But as I mentioned, they're not in spaces with conservatives and with even moderates. And I think most importantly, not with like working class people and people who don't have a college degree or higher education. And so I see the way that they, you know, promote left-wing politics and organizing on social media, the way they talk about it. And it alienates working class people, right? If you look at like how most people in America, especially working class uneducated people, see the left, it's with like huge disdain. And I kind of get that. And so I'm just curious if you have ideas on how do we, you know, get across to this really group of amazing left-wing, tend to be younger, tend to be very well educated, organized, who are doing great work and are so well intentioned. How do we get across these sort of like strategies and framing and messaging appeals to them, so that they're able to, you know, be the great organizers that they are, but in organizing, like, you know, working class people in rural communities. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for another great question. I think there's a million different answers to it, and I'll give you my answer. But I think everybody does what they can where they are. That's the best, you know, in my view, use of energy. There's a reason why I can go to a Trump rally and have conversations because I look like this and I grew up there. And lots of other people can do that too, but I'm not going to be the best person to go into the communities that you're describing because I don't have any of that lived experience. But I would say just to the more like urban and left, coastal urban left-wing organizers, look at the Starbucks movement there. There's now 500 unionized Starbucks stores. Okay, there's not a Starbucks within spitting distance of me, but it's that exact community that you talked about that kicked off a movement we have now with 500 stores that before any of that happened would be something easily dismissed with a hand wave. Oh, you want to unionize Starbucks without a affiliation with a union that doesn't even exist? I think a lot of that energy is, and speaking personally, if I could wind back the clock 10 years and have the experiences I've had up to this point, if you're familiar with salting, getting a job at a place with the intention to organize a union there, I think that is one of the best, again, this is my answer. A lot of other people have different answers. But I think, young people going into places with the intention to do exactly what you're talking about, unionize whoever is working there. There's no better political education than that. And I think you can see that through listening to the people that kicked off the Starbucks movement. So there's a place for everybody, and I think the right place is wherever you are and doing that. Another thing I wanted to add in there, you've heard me a couple of times in this talk, mention that I talk to people and don't hide the fact that I identify as a socialist. I don't think that's for everybody either. I certainly didn't do that when I was organizing with the Democratic Party in rural areas, but now I think the value of that is we have to, move the Overton window. We have to do, we always get, the right is very good at moving the goalposts further and further right, and it drags the center along with it. So when you throw a guy into rural areas that's saying, I'm an open socialist, that's a conversation starter that can start to drag the middle back to a productive place. And, I might be out here doing this work, and a lot of people might be in the new middle organizing people that way. So that's all to say, I think that everybody on this call, everybody doing this work, wherever you are, is the best place to start. And, people usually have a good idea of how to do that, without needing any kind of education too.
So we have quite a few more hands, so I'll just ask everyone to try and make your comment or question as brief as possible. Maya, let's go to you.
Hello, everybody. See and hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Very inspiring to see you on the Democratic convention stage. I've been a longtime admirer of Perfect Union and the work that you all are doing. I also find myself noticing that many people, in terms of talking to people where they're at, right? My mom is doing a lot of canvassing for the Democratic Party. She's currently retired, so go mom. Thank you. I'm not thrilled with the Democratic Party. I think they've failed in a lot of ways. I also think they've failed because they are working towards corporate interests, as most of us are probably well aware of. Obviously, the GOP is also something we do not want to get into power. And I just want to share, and perhaps a question will come out of this sharing as well, but I want to share the angle that I have been telling my mom to take with these young, perhaps unregistered voters, to get them to pay attention to both their local elections and to show up in this election, because it is extremely important, even though we do not perhaps like the direction the country is going. So two things that I notice is one, that the United Auto Workers have called for a ceasefire on record. That's very important to a lot of young voters. Climate change is also real and very important to a lot of young voters. Sean Fain has also endorsed Kamala Harris, right? Climate Defiance are well-known agitators. They have also endorsed Kamala Harris with stipulations that they are not thrilled on her policies. However, one thing we all have to note is that identity isn't everything, right? And that's the doublespeak, and like that's the environment that we exist in today, is that we all have convoluted identity with power or with alliance. And all of these unions or organizations well understand power and how power can be utilized, right?
Maya.
That's it.
Sorry, Susie. Okay, thanks for wrapping up. I just want to make sure we can get to everyone. And John, if you have a quick response to that, go for it.
Yeah, I'll try to keep the responses quick. Ceasefire is obviously something that I want and have been trying to make media around for a while. I'm encouraged by unions coming out and leading the charge on that. I think, part of the challenge to the Democratic Party from the debate stage, and I think, we all want Donald Trump to lose, right? And we all want people to vote down ballot, and we don't want, any of this always a thing in gatherings of Democrats where we're naturally dissatisfied, right? Because we want to make change, and that's harder than just kicking everything down. So I think we just have to live with that, and we have to be comfortable with honest criticism about our party. We have to recognize that is going to relate to people who are questioning whether or not to join. We have to be comfortable with the messiness of that as we all find a direction. And I think none of that takes away from somebody thinking whether to join your side if they see you, having an honest discussion about how to make one of two choices that 300 million people have to fit into better than it is now. Like we're never going to be at a time when it's perfect, and we always have to be pushing. Very grateful for unions doing that. And, for my piece, I would like to see the party, we were based on organized labor for a long time. That went downhill. We kind of replaced that base of power with corporate money, and we had to do that because, both parties really presided over the floodgates of that opening. But now I think there's a real chance to make the base of the party organize working class people in a way that it hasn't been in so long. And that's going to be messy, and there's going to be setbacks and a lot of discomfort in pushing for that, but it's got to happen if we're going to deal with this. We have really big problems that are going to deal with us before we deal with them, unless we live within that messiness as we all push to get to a place where there is a political home for people that are organized on their class interest and constantly doing the work to keep that solidarity going.
John, do you have another few minutes to stay on with?
Totally. Yeah, I should have talked less. I really love question and answer stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go to Lily, and then I do want to encourage everyone to stay on until the very, very end, because I'm going to tease our next two briefings, which are going to be really exciting. And Anthony also has a really important announcement about how you can get involved between now and Election Day. So please do stay on if you can. Lily, go ahead.
Hi, John. I love the work that you do. I'm an early career journalist, and I love More Perfect Union. So I just have a quick kind of question. I'm really interested in the increasing gender divide amongst Gen Zers. The fact that young men are turning away from the Democratic Party, even though they have a lot of really progressive economic values, like there's like the Harvard IOP poll said like 60% of young men believe that healthcare is a universal right and the government should provide it, but they still don't identify with the Democratic Party because of kind of gender issues, social issues, you know, the Ben Shapiro's of the world, the fact that the Democrats haven't delivered on a lot of things. Anyway, so I understand why young men have come to those conclusions. And so I wondered if you have any specific thoughts or thoughts on that specific phenomenon. And then two, in a similar vein to kind of Moose's question, like how do you talk to other progressives and other young women and convince them that like conservative young men who they feel maybe are like an affront to them personally should be brought into the tent and can be brought into the tent because we have all of these same shared economic concerns. So yeah.
Another great question. And yeah, I hope the freewheeling nature of these answers goes in a positive direction. But yeah, one of the things I really feel like we need to be doing, you know, we talked about popular political education and building media networks, kind of like the right has, to, you know, get a set of opinions out there that people can consider for themselves. And one of the areas I think needs to happen is like positive masculinity, right? Because the right has put in front of everybody many examples of the exact opposite of that. Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Andrew Tate, all these people that want young men to think that, you know, you're a patriarch, you're the only provider, you are an island, you are an individual. And I think there is a lot of opportunity that we all can model in our work of, if we're talking about, you know, young men and what it means to be a man. I think there needs to be an alternative out there of community care, of, you know, building power within your community to win the things that it wants, of being a part of society, of being a part of something that's bigger than yourself, and defining that as, you know, one of the ways to be manly in a positive way, right? I mean, those are traits, you know, that are respectable when they're coming from anyone. And I think and there's models all over the place for that out in our communities. And I feel like they need to be represented in our politics more, represented in media, to interrupt the pipeline that the right has laid out to, you know, suck so many young men into, you know, horribly destructive trends. Anything we can do, you know, to interrupt that and get people into fighting for your community, standing strong for your community, standing up for people that are different than you. I think those need to be the examples that are put directly against very small people like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and all the rest. And, you know, I think if you have anybody with money or influence, you should bend their ear to fund those kind of things, because it's needed.
Thanks, Lily. Okay, Mark Albert for our last question of the day.
Well, first I wanted to defend the Democratic Party, because I feel it's important to point out that the Democratic Party is aware of the impact on the entire economy, the wealthy as well as the working class and lower level. But the biggest difference between the way Democrats approach things and Republicans approach things is that Democrats realize that the way you stimulate the economy is to put stimulus in the middle and the bottom of the economy, not at the top to trickle down, because that never works. So some of the things that the Democrats do that benefit the top of the economy aren't being done out of a desire to damage the lower part. But I want to get to my question, though. You were talking about hitting Trump as being, he's doing things to benefit the billionaire class and picturing as part of the billionaire class. But I was also wondering, how effective do you find it to be to point out the fact that he's gone bankrupt 5 times? He's actually not a good businessman. And in fact, one of the reasons I say we need to keep him out of the White House is he's gone bankrupt 5 times. Do we want him to bankrupt? Do we want him to ruin this entire economy, this entire country? Because he's failed so many times at business.
I find it to be effective. Yeah. I mean, anytime you can point out where, the simple rule of thumb, right? Which side are you on? And anytime you can bring that up and have a conversation with somebody else that might not agree with you, where you walk through the fact that this is a man who has a long history of stiffing small business people or busting unions or, showing up to natural disasters and making a mockery of it. Those are all exhibit A, B, and C that are very helpful to show that this is not a, benevolent billionaire using the power of his money to help the little guy. This is, the wolf in sheep's clothing. So anytime you can kind of sandbag what people know to be true and follow up with an organizing conversation based on the things that we all share in common, I think, yeah, absolutely helps.
Thank you. Okay, Jackie, we can stop the recording now. I want to thank John Russell so much. This has been such a terrific conversation. Anthony, I'm going to ask you to pop in now and tell people